Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, June 28th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right. First item on the agenda tonight is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have any requests for changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda for June 28th, 2021.
I have a motion from Commissioner DeSanctis to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Higgins. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Moving on, we have the minutes from the meeting held Monday, June 14th, 2021. Any concerns about the minutes or any requests for changes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
All right, motion from Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner DeSanctis. All those in favor of approving the June 14th minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right, tonight we have two public hearings. The first is the Asian Plaza 2021-06, request for planned unit development concept review on 4.68 acres, planned unit development district review with waivers on 4.68 acres, site plan review for facade remodel on 4.68 acres. Will the proponent of the project please come forward and good evening. If you could state your name for the record and tell us about your project, please.
I'm sorry, and do what?
State your name for the record and tell us about your project.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My name is Jay Eisenberg. Last name is Eisenberg, I-S-E-N-B-E-R-G. I am the address is 8640 Winsdale Street North in Golden Valley, Minnesota. I'm a consulting architect for the project, and as part of the project team, and you'll see behind me we have a nice contingent from the ownership group, as well as the architect of record here. So we should be equipped to answer just about any questions, hopefully. The presentation will be a summary of the development proposal in support of our request for a PUD parking waiver, the site plan improvements, and the facade improvements as well. I just want to say really quickly, this entire project up till this point has been done on Zoom, and so when I walked in, I met Julie for the first time, and of course, the first thing she says to me is, "I thought you were taller." That's okay. I get it all the time. It's not a problem. Okay, so I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to figure out how to work this. There we go. And it's, okay. So as I mentioned on the first slide, this is a presentation in support of our request, which we've gone over a couple times. There we go. Oh, it works. Fantastic. The project is the adaptive reuse of the vacant Gander Mountain big box retail center. I believe it's been vacant maybe 10 years. I'm not quite sure. The project concept is the creation of a vibrant regional gathering center celebrating the Twin Cities Asian community. I thought the first thing we might do is just go over a quick review of the floor plan intentions. The first floor plan, the main floor, is proposed in a program that contains a mix of spaces, a grocery store, retail, restaurants, and anchored by this large 31,000 square foot Asian grocery store. At this point, no exterior additions are planned for the project. Let me think here. There we go. Second floor is the mezzanine, which is currently on one side of the building, only on the upper side of the drawing. The proposed addition would extend the mezzanine around the three other sides outlined in the blue dashed line, and that again would be 16,000 square feet, and that again would be a mix of use of spaces, including two full-service restaurants, 4 smaller supportive restaurant types around a food court, and a mix of supportive small-scale retail, office, or other support services. So that is the plan in intention. The proposed site plan improvements are a result of our facade improvement request, and the intentions, and I don't know if you want me to point all of these out. I think I have sort of a limited time here, but we're going to be improving the pedestrian and vehicular safety by striping the, let's see, I don't have a, it doesn't work, right? Okay, but I'll just walk this through. I think you're somewhat familiar with it. We'll be striping the main entry again in a typical fashion. We'll also be striping the lower level entry into the lower level parking, which you can see the building on the left. We'll be adding a colored pedestrian walkway across one of the aisles, as we see in some other developments in the city of Eden Prairie. We're intending to add bike racks in the corner of the building. I'm sorry, I guess you can see bike racks. We're planning to provide 2 level 2 EV stations in the lower level with the idea of expanding that to 4 if needed. We're going to convert what's currently now just a painted island at the end of the parking island at the end of one of the rows into a raised curb with landscaping. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. And the big issue, which we'll talk about, I guess, or Julie will talk about, is we are outlining a potential location of a covered parking area, and we're indicating it sort of on the right side of the drawing right now. It's possible it could end up somewhere else if it's required, but the intention is that should the city deem the parking inadequate, as we are requesting to keep it as is, that the owners have discussed committing to a covered parking ramp. So this is as far as we are with this at this point. Julie can talk about that more, I believe. Currently, the parking is 294 spaces, which you can see 77 of them underground, under the lower level, and the rest, 211, I believe, are on grade. I'm also indicating in the corner, you can see that round hexagonal shape, and that's a proposed future hexagonal pavilion, a public gathering space that is a future proposal because it needs its own variance for impervious, additional impervious space. So we're holding that off, but we wanted to show you where we're intending to do that. And the owners have also talked a little bit about the potential for a rooftop solar array in the future, to look at that if it's economically feasible or a desired element. So at this point, we aren't proposing that as well. I think I probably hit all of those things. So as I mentioned, the mezzanine addition is what's triggering our parking waiver request. And the owners commissioned a parking demand and traffic study report by Alliant Engineering. They're experienced in this kind of work. And the table indicates the calculations that we went through in terms of the uses of the space, the square footage that requires, and how it translates into the current parking zoning code requirement of 4.5 spaces per 1,000 gross square feet. We also looked at the restaurants, and we made the parking required for the restaurants and the number of seats equivalent to what would be required if it were just square footage. So we wanted to make sure we didn't increase the parking per our calculation. So according to current zoning code, taking the addition into account, the parking requirement is, boy, I thought I'd have a bigger look here, is 384 spots, which is a 92 parking space deficit. And this is what our PUD parking waiver is based on. Without going through each study, each result, the parking demand and traffic study concluded that the results indicate that the parking demand would be accommodated through the existing 294 spaces, and that there would be no impacts to the surrounding properties and roadways. They conducted the study through the typical traffic engineering data calculation, so it's not something they made up. We wanted to make sure they went by the official manuals that the city would understand. So that is the result, and that's what we're here to ask about based on this result. In addition, the The PUD waiver, as well as the site plan and the facade, we think aligns with a number of the goals and objectives of the comp plan, the Aspire Eden Prairie 2040. And again, I'm not going to highlight all of those. It's just about something in every chapter was cogent. And clearly in Chapter 5, this is an economic competitiveness. This is going to be, we think, a super economic engine when it's up and running in full force. We think it's going to be a regional draw and a pretty exciting project. And I want to point out, in terms of transportation and accessibility, the words of the plan itself call for that commissions like this and zoning and planning can be influential in achieving the objectives of reducing single-car trips and single-car occupancy standard things that we're trying to change. So again, I think the point was that zoning regulations, planning commissions, variances, waivers, and things are tools that we can use. And I think this is a good example of how that might come about. So I just wanted to point that out. As far as the facade improvements, the intention is to provide, to change the Gander Mountain, to reimagine and repurpose the facade. And we would, the outdoor look of the former Gander Mountain facade will be adopted to reflect the inviting Asian theme as reflected in the following exterior images. And we did do the materials and the percentage calculations to make sure that we comply. But as shown in these renderings, the details and materials, the colors, and the culturally related new elements proposed, we think will integrate seamlessly into the majority of the existing building materials and colors and provide a striking and inviting new building vision. And so the signage will be in the future by individual consultant, and it'll obviously have to go through approval as well. But that's not shown on here, but it would be at the gable end, probably a really nice sign, et cetera. So I think so. This is two of the elevations, and those are the two. And I think you can see it's a very inviting adaptation of the existing Gander Mountain. So that concludes my presentation, and I want to thank you all, and I want to especially thank Julie for working so hard with us over a 6-month to 9-month period. Staff was incredible. I can't tell you how important it was to have her help and direction. So with that, I thank you, and sit down, I guess.
Thank you. Any initial
Okay.
questions for Mr. Eisenberg?
Oh.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
you said you were going to approve some circulation, vehicular and pedestrian circulation. I didn't note on your plan if you had a signage directing visitors to that lower level parking feature, so that people know that there's extra parking. People have a tendency, of course, to look on grade first.
Sure.
Of course, and I want to make sure that there's plenty of knowledge given to the visitors so that they know that there's another source of parking.
Right.
I'm sure employees will be encouraged maybe to park down there first. I don't know that, but could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
I think there's two things I can respond is one, the entire wayfinding signage piece is obviously not exactly part of this particular presentation, but if there are specific things that are part of the application process and the site plan review and the further explanation of the project, we'll do everything we can to make sure people know where to go. I think the intention in the Fuller report says that the owners are planning to run a shuttle service for employees from a building they own on 494, which would direct them to the lower level, take them directly to the lower level. In terms of general public signage, I think that's an issue we should deal with, exactly as you say, so make sure there's no confusion on what to do.
All right. So maybe just playing off what you just said about employee parking being off-site and whatever, I understood the summary finding from the Alliant Engineering summary report saying that the demand for parking would be accommodated through the existing combination of underground and surface stalls, but the chart you put up was just the city calculations. Was there a chart that you could show us that showed the ITE trip manual calculations to demonstrate that?
A full report, I think, was provided to staff, and I don't know if that it was
Okay.
included in your packet or not.
It
but
wasn't, at least in mine, I didn't think, so
Okay.
maybe staff can,
Yeah,
they
that
can
was a
address
fuller-
that during there.
That was a fuller report with the supporting evidence and tables and documents that they did. So can you make sure Mr. Farr gets that, please? Julie? Can you make sure that,
I'm sorry, I was talking with
I was just
Rod.
saying, can you make sure the commission gets that,
Yep.
especially if it's a question you have that would hold up any
Great.
approval of the request so far. So thank you for the question, yeah.
Other questions from Mr. Eisenberg? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Julie, will you take us through the staff report?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant is before you this evening asking for a site plan review in order to accommodate the facade improvements and the site improvements that Mr. Eisenberg spoke about. Specifically, some of those things include striping in the parking lot, as well as creating a pedestrian, colored concrete pedestrian connection through the parking lot, changing some of those islands to include landscaping. And the larger request this evening is the PUD waiver to allow for the existing parking to accommodate the intended additional floor area that would be added by expanding the mezzanine. So as Mr. Eisenberg discussed, with the additional square footage and the reuse of the building in calculating the parking requirements for the proposed restaurants and retail uses, the site would fall 92 parking stalls short of the city code requirement. As Mr. Eisenberg noted, the developer has provided a traffic analysis which has indicated that the existing parking would meet the business need of the proposed use, and Mr. Rue can speak to that in further detail if you have some follow-up questions on that. But the waiver request is to allow parking consistent with what is on site, with the understanding that through the development agreement, language would be included that allows the city the discretion to require that a parking ramp be constructed or structured parking be constructed on site if the existing parking proves to not be satisfactory. This is a similar approach that the city has taken with several other sites within the community, including language in the development agreement. I see a commissioner asking which ones. So the Menards property is one, Champions Hall, Windsor Plaza are all examples of developments that include similar language in the development agreement. The building materials that are proposed as part of the facade improvements all comply with city code requirements, so staff is recommending approval and doesn't have any concerns with regard to those facade improvements. As Mr. Eisenberg noted, the drawings that were included with your packet do include a pavilion. That's for illustrative purposes only at this point. The property is within the shoreland ordinance or shoreland zone area, which does have a limitation on the amount of impervious surface. So because the pavilion is indicated in an area that's currently pervious, the developer has opted to not construct that at this time, but rather to continue some forward momentum on the potential mezzanine addition and facade improvements, and would, if they deem appropriate in the future, come back and explore the construction of the pavilion as necessary. So staff is recommending approval of the PUD amendment and the site plan improvements as noted in your staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for the city?
I have a question.
Commissioner Sanctus.
Julie, is there a long-term plan for the city to perhaps tie in with commercial establishments along Technology and in the vicinity of the shopping mall to provide some type of shuttle service which would allow people to park in the constructed parking ramp, the one that's under construction by the transit station, so that there might be, in this case, a particular way to coordinate through signage an opportunity for people to park in that ramp that's being constructed and then shuttled over to the site?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, at this point, there have not been any conversations between the city or individual property owners that I'm aware of about that potential. The parking ramp that was constructed was sized based on what Met Council and LRT and Southwest Transit, being the partners on that site, anticipated would be the long-term need for that site. Now, that's not to say that in the future there couldn't be some cooperative agreement that is reached between those entities, but again, the city, certainly is a partner in Southwest Transit, but we certainly can't speak for the other partners or the Met Council.
Other questions? I have a question, I think maybe it's for Rod. Our code's requiring 386 and the study is 294. It's like a 30% difference. So could you just kind of reconcile that for me? Is it just based on the business use, or is our code a little, does our code need to be looked at, or?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'll take a stab at that, and Rod can save me. So the Gander Mountain site, when it was constructed, it was 100% retail use. And retail requirement in code is 5 parking stalls for every 1,000 square feet of floor area. Through their PUD approval, they received a waiver to go to 4.5 stalls per 1,000, which is consistent with other big box type of retail sites that you see within the city. What complicates the parking analysis a little bit more on this site with the reuse is that the proposed use includes not only retail, which calculates on a square footage basis, but it also includes restaurants, which calculates parking on a per seat basis. Excuse me. So that calculation gets a little more complicated, and the developer was very cooperative in working with the city to provide those numbers with regard to how many seats are proposed within that area and how many seats could be allowed in order to comply with the parking that is proposed on site. So because there's a mix of uses going on here, that makes it a little bit out of the box, if you will.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fart.
Yeah, okay, so I guess I just want to do a deeper dive on that. There are a lot of different uses, and is it fair to say, is staff satisfied with, are they confident in the Alliant Engineering findings?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I've reviewed the Alliant report, and it seems to make reasonable sense in that they have analyzed both the parking and the traffic demand. And as far as that, we're talking about the parking, I guess kind of the summary of that parking analysis was that with the multiple uses within this facility, they have different peaks. The grocery has a different peak than the restaurant, than the office, and so forth. So there's a chart that was provided in there that shows the peaks of different uses, and if you combine those peaks during each given hour of the day, they don't exceed the 294. On a hypothetical maximum weekday and Saturday peak, which is the two that they analyzed, or at least the highest, the demand for the hypothetical maximum weekday was 280 vehicles, and the maximum for that Saturday peak was 262, which are both below the 294. And then they also analyzed the peak hours, and that demand was 220 for a weekday and 226 for the Saturday. Again, less than the 294. So it's a matter of some of these are short trips in and out, but all the peaks don't match at the same time. So sure. If you have a single use property, then obviously that peak is going to maximize. In this case, they're variable.
Okay. And were all those numbers that you just quoted assuming that employees would be parking on site, or was it taking into consideration the applicant's statement about parking off site and being shuttled in?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the study took into account an expectation that I believe 15 to 25 of the employees would be parking off-site and be shuttled in. So not necessarily all of the employees, but it did account for some of them being shuttled in.
All right, all right. So, I'm just asking because, that the statement of them putting up a parking ramp is certainly last resort. I just don't, it's probably not my position to say it's not financially feasible, but I said it. We're $2 million project that itself would be disruptive and it's a last resort. I mean, I think everybody knows that. And so I'm trying to figure out if there's another way that they could still survive by reducing density if they needed to, if there's just another thing that they could do if there was a parking problem before the heavy hammer came down. And I suppose maybe that's just a discussion for the future because it's not our purview to say, if they're having parking problems, I suppose that's on a complaint base. You're not going to be out there counting cars or anything.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that's a correct statement. Certainly, the city's not going to be out there counting cars, but if we do receive complaints about parking spilling out onto Technology Drive or other complaints about just it's really hard to get in and out of this site, sometimes we do get those kind of comments as well. It is something that staff would certainly follow up with the property owner on.
Okay, and I imagine if the parking deck was required, that would be a land disturbance, and a land disturbance would trigger the stormwater management compliance that they're avoiding here?
Well, if they would increase their impervious surface, they would have to look at that, yes.
Okay.
But if they're doing a ramp, for example, the last resort putting in a ramp, if they did the ramp over an impervious surface that's already existing, that wouldn't be applicable.
All right, even if they make a disturbance.
Right.
All right. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Kirk?
This is a topic that I put a little bit of thought into over time, and thinking about it relative to this, when I think about parking and the importance of having enough parking, because we have one restaurant that went in the city and basically said, don't worry, we have all these mitigation things, and the parking's horrible. And I don't like it, and I think we as a commission made a mistake there. That said, to me, there are two issues with respect to parking. One is, will it impact the city streets and the traffic flow? And in this circumstance, to me, it doesn't seem that, say you didn't have enough parking, the impact would probably not be to the city streets. It would simply be that fewer people would come into the facility. So the impact on that would be to your business. And our job, and my job, sitting up here, is to focus on the impact on the city. And if you choose to go with insufficient parking that does not impact the city, but impacts your own business, then you're going to have an incentive to do something to fix that. And I think that's okay, as long as it doesn't impact the city. And I don't see in this location where there would be spillover parking on a street, or whether there would be spillover parking that would impact other businesses. In other words, this location's, to me, a little bit on its own. And so that's where I walked around that issue and came to my own conclusion, is that if the proponent is satisfied with the parking, I personally think that's their call on this one, so long as it doesn't impact the city. And I say that's an opinion, but in my opinion, there wouldn't be a major impact on city streets and traffic and disruption in that way. So just to piggyback on your thought, I just wanted to add those thoughts, because that was the one issue on this proposal that got my attention, and I put a little bit of thought into it.
Julie?
Commissioner Sanctus?
I'd like to pivot away from the focus on parking stalls and look at the future. You're building a light rail system. You're going to have a transit station. How can we get people safely as pedestrians from the nearest transit stop to this commercial establishment and others in the city? And what is the city's proposal to link with these establishments so that people can safely walk with their family from the train station to the project?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so certainly with the upcoming opening of LRT, as a part of that, there are also efforts to make pedestrian connections, not only in this area, but in other areas along the LRT corridor. So the city has secured a grant through, I believe it's through Hennepin County, that will assist in constructing a trail or making a trail connection at the town center station in order to connect that station to other areas within the town center. Certainly there's a trail along Flying Cloud Drive that connects up toward this area. It certainly goes around the lake. There is also long-term plans for a north-south roadway connection through the town center that would connect up to Technology Drive. Again, not necessarily directly to the front door of this property, but future connections certainly.
Other comments, questions, discussion, or go to the public hearing first? Okay. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please step forward now. All right. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Motion from Commissioner Gooding to close. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Commissioner Farr. All those in favor of close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. Further discussion. Commissioner Marcos.
Yeah, I just add a couple extra thoughts on it. I agree with what you guys are saying. The parking ramp should be the last choice in this situation. I appreciate that you guys have already offered that as an option, that you're willing to work with the city and making sure that this is a successful site. I love the idea of the mixed use, multiple function space, especially for this building. And I think that's a great asset for this community to bring that culture to the community and have that for people living here. And I'm excited personally because I don't have to go to Minneapolis or St. Paul to go to something like this. And I think that's great for our community that's increasing in diversity. And that's what we keep telling our team, you know, that's what we want, right? So I think that's a great asset. And yeah, everything I have seen in here, I think they've done a nice job of working with the city and appreciate that. So I don't think that the shortage of parking is going to be, hopefully not an issue. I mean, maybe you want it to be an issue. It's good business. But I agree with Commissioner Kirk that, you know, it's a business issue at that point. And from the city perspective, we've done a good job of analyzing that. So.
Commissioner Gooding.
Yes, and I would like to sort of piggyback off what Commissioner Marcos said. Related to parking, I look at it, it would be a mistake for a business to try and understate their parking. You know, most of the time we deal with people wanting more parking than the area will allow. In this case, they're saying they have enough, and I think it looks from, you know, I would agree with that, and it's I can't imagine a business coming in here and saying they've got enough if they weren't, if they had to put a structured parking ramp back up. So I think this looks like an exciting project and anxious to see it done.
Commissioner Higgins.
I'll just echo what Commissioners Marcos and Mr. I keep thinking of your name and I can't. But in any case, I think that's where I came out too, is that this whole process of finding the various uses for the building included what people already know about the behavior of customers that come and go or stay for whatever purpose. And there's enough variety, I think, in what's being put together here that I think it succeeds. And I think there are some options that they've already developed even now going for the Alliance study and so forth. I think that was very important. So I'm in favor of going forward.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farr. Yeah, I think this is a wonderful project. I think it's really engaging. I think it'll be a regional draw, not just for our city, but regionally. I like the visibility of it. It's in a busy part of the city. You can get a lot of visible traffic along Highway 5 and Technology Drive for it, and I think it's going to draw people in to Eden Prairie. So I appreciate you choosing Eden Prairie for this business. I was just drilling down on the traffic to make sure that you have a successful model. I really want this to succeed, and I didn't want you to get caught short there. There's just one thing from a parking deck standpoint with that lower level parking, and I talked a little bit about this before. They have those electronic sensors that you may have seen in some airport parking garages, the green and red lights overhead that detect when a car is parked there. Mall of America, I think, has it. And so you could put an electronic display, if it comes to this, out when you drive into the site to say, hey, there are 50 stalls available, follow me, type thing, and track those numbers. Just technology before you have to force your hand with the parking deck. But again, I hope you all the business in the world, so that's great. I'm very supportive of the project. I like what you did architecturally to the building. It had a good bones to it, I think, for your use, and to put that a flare on it, it was very nice. So, thank you.
I would like to agree. Commissioner Marcos did a nice job of summarizing, and I certainly feel this is a strong project for us, and like to see it in Eden Prairie, and look forward to being a patron.
I'm really pleased to hear about your consideration of a solar array, perhaps within a 5-year period, and that tells me that you're forward-thinking. This is an incredibly interesting and creative project, and I think a real shot in the arm, not just for the economy in Eden Prairie, but the whole Southwest, West Central Metro, and Minneapolis as well.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval for planned unit development concept review on 4.68 acres, planned unit development district review with waivers on 4.68 acres, and site plan review on 4.68 acres, based on plans stamped dated June 15th, 2021, and the staff report dated June 25th, 2021.
I have a motion for Commissioner Farr. Do I have a second for approval?
Second.
Second for Commissioner Kirk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? All right, that is approved. Good luck. Great project, very exciting. All right, moving on this evening, we have one more public hearing. This is for Burger King 2021-07, request for planned unit development concept review on 1.34 acres, planned unit development district review with waivers on 1.34 acres, site plan review on 1.34 acres. Will the proponent of the project please come forward? Good evening. If you would state your name and spell for the record, please, and tell us about your project.
Sure. My name is John Kaiser. Address is 1624 West 18th Street in Chicago, Illinois. I'm with Cave Enterprises Operations, and we are the franchisee, and we're the developer of the property as well. It's been a long time since we first started. I did want to just kind of make an initial introduction to you guys as far as this particular property, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Kevin is our architect, and I think Kevin and I first came out to this site in the fourth quarter of 2018. We were engaged by Burger King Corporation to take a look at it for a redevelopment. The previous operator went into some financial distress and ceased to operate. I know it was prior to 2018. I don't have the exact date. But due to some circumstances outside of our purview, it was a group of 9 restaurants. There was 2 in Eden Prairie, a couple in Minneapolis. I think you guys might be familiar with the 9 restaurants that they operated. They went into a protracted bankruptcy situation and some other legal matters that we really weren't involved with, but We've been interested in redeveloping this site as a franchisee for, I think we're right up here on 3 years now. So the fact that I'm up here finally being able to discuss this project with everybody is a big deal for our company. It's been kind of a painful delay in getting to this point. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we're very excited to be able to get to this point where we can introduce our project to you. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about who Cave Enterprise Operations LLC is. We're a franchisee of the Burger King restaurant brand. We're based out of Chicago. We have 166 restaurants. We operate in 6 different states, mostly in the Midwest, the Great Lakes region. We also operate restaurants in South Dakota. It's more or less a family-owned business. The Cave stands for Caesar Adam Velarde, and the principal franchisee, the gentleman that I worked for, Adam Velarde, started this business in 1999 when he got out of college. He became a franchisee of Burger King. He built his first restaurant in Lamont, Illinois back then. So he's been invested in the brand for a long time, and his father, Caesar, kind of helped him start financially to open that first restaurant, and we've kind of grown through organic growth and through acquisitions over the course of the last 20 years. So we've gotten, pretty sizable, but we operate, with a model of family business. I mean, I've been with him for going on 7 or 8 years, and if you pick up the phone, anyone from a municipality, and everyone would have our mobile numbers. You have a question, we answer our phones, we address problems. You don't get lost into we're not the giant Burger King corporation. We're a small franchisee. So yeah, it's a private family-owned business. We are very invested in the brand, and we're members of Burger King Corporate's Action Inclusion Committee, their Operations Council. We sit on the board for the financial arm called the CFO Roundtable Committee. We're also part of the Image Committee. So our team works with the brand to develop the image, and Kevin actually works with us and he happens to be based out of nearby, right in Bloomington, his firm Coma. So we've worked to develop this new prototype building, and this is really one of the first, it's called the Pavilion. It's one of our first buildings of this design in the country. I think there's one other one that's under construction now, and this will be the, really one of the first ones that'll hopefully get built. Some simple elevations, some modeling or perspectives of what the building will look like. We worked with staff quite a bit on the site plan and also just the building design. Worked a lot with direct engagement with Sarah, and it's kind of a departure from what the brand has typically done. Some modern look, and the intent is to, expand the glass so that the customers kind of have a experience that really illuminates the outside with all the glass, and also kind of brings all the natural light into the building. So it's a play on exterior and interior components. They've really expanded on the use of the glass, and they've kind of lowered the profile of the building, so it's not, a typical QSR restaurant might be in the 23, 24-foot range. We're down to like 18 feet overall height, so kind of just try to give it a more contemporary, more modern feel. These are elevations from the renderings that show the 4 different sides of the building. We did, Adam wanted to do he was very adamant about doing a play structure. This is really the first play structure that we've done, at least in recent memory. And his feelings were, he's got a lot of young kids. I think with COVID and, being at home with them and the amount of screen time all the young kids seem to be engaged with these days, he was really wanted to create an environment where there was active play, not just coming in and grabbing some food, but giving an opportunity for young kids to be able to have some real physical space to engage with the outdoors. So the use is very similar to what it was before. I mean, it was a Burger King restaurant before. It's a Burger King restaurant today. We're making it smaller in terms of square footage, but we're just adding this element onto it. And I know Eden Prairie has a lot of great parks and outdoor play spaces, but he really felt strongly that it was something he wanted to incorporate into this redevelopment. There's a slide of the floor plan. I don't know if you guys have any questions about that, but it accommodates about 64 seats in our dining room space. It has multiple occupant restrooms, kitchens, designed simply to kind of be as efficient as possible ergonomically. And if you have any questions about the interior, please feel free to ask. Oops. Site plan. The layout, when we first looked at this project back in 2018, the original intent, and when we discussed it with staff, was to remodel the existing location. That was what we had originally thought made sense for us. After we started to look at it more closely, and considering the time that passed and the state of that building, it really started to become or make more sense for us to just look at starting over. So I think it was the right thing to do. The layout isn't really a grand departure in terms of the way the cars are conveyed through the lot or the building placement. Not a significant departure from what's there. I mean, the way the site lays out, didn't really make sense to try to reposition the building, in a different fashion. It functions very well this way in terms of conveying traffic around the site and letting them come in and out. As the staff report indicates, we made significant reductions to asphalt surfaces and made appropriate adjustments to the landscape plan, et cetera. From a stormwater conveyance perspective, we are doing like a bio infiltration pond. So the water does get naturally treated from the parking lot through the filtration pond. We're not adding or discharging additional stormwater into the stormwater system for the city. The utility plan, not going to go into great detail about that. Unfortunately, my civil engineer wasn't able to make it tonight, but he is on standby if you guys have any real granular questions about that. He said he'd have the plans at home and we could call him if you have any particular questions. I can get a hold of Jason. As far as some of the sustainability components I could touch on, we are reusing some of the existing base materials on site when we repurpose them for the redevelopment. We did reduce the impervious surface on the site. reduce the amount of vehicle parking stalls, provided bicycle parking, of course, for cyclists, using native plant species. We are using pervious pavers in the playland area. We're also using a poured-in-place. The poured-in-place safety surface for the playland is also a pervious surface. I don't know if that wasn't, I think, added to our narrative, but the safety surface is also a pervious material. The new building, unlike remodeling it, obviously meets and actually exceeds the energy code requirements. Kevin ran the comp check on that report. And we're using a white reflective membrane roof system. It's a Duralast roof system. It reduces energy consumption, exceeds industry standards for reflectivity and thermal emissivity. And all of our rooftop units are obviously like the high efficiency refrigerant. We have low flow water faucets on all of our fixtures, motion detector lighting sensors, and the whole site and building is fit up with high quality LED lighting fixtures. I think that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Initial questions. Commissioner Sanctus.
I have one specific question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have you consulted with the city arborist about the selection of trees?
I'm assuming so. I don't know that I would say with 100% certainty, but I know that we vetted out our landscape plan and have gone through staff review.
Because I was reading, and the species that you were considering were native, as enumerated in that slide. But
Yes, sir.
Colorado spruce are not native to Minnesota, and they're doing very poorly. And all I'm saying is you may want to check with the city arborist about alternatives to the
Yeah.
Colorado spruce, particularly as our climate gets warmer and drier.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, yeah, as in any project, we do review the landscape plan and the species, and as you mentioned, a number of them are native, the basswood, some of those other. Colorado blue spruce are a highly used plant in this area. Some years like we've had this year makes it a little bit tougher than some, but still a very widely used tree species for this zone.
Other initial questions? Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farr. As you probably know, this body approved and the city council did also a Starbucks coffee.
Yes.
Right next to you. And so we asked them how they were going to get in and out, and they said through your site.
Correct.
Here you are.
Yeah.
So what accommodations have you made or on traffic control, if and as necessary, where their traffic comes in and out and your traffic comes in and out through that one driveway?
Yeah, we did look at that. I think that the nice thing about the way things are currently situated, well, our new site plan and where Starbucks wants to go is, our traffic's going to convey, through the approach, and then we're able to queue all of our cars through that long parking lot and then around the front and around. And it really creates a nice separation from the traffic that Starbucks is going to attract on the east side of the property. So we didn't really see that there was a conflict that way. And then we are providing them an easement for their sidewalk, cross access as well. We're excited to have Starbucks, as our neighbor as well.
Sure. Okay. So you guys don't have a problem with just the morning rush with cars coming and going?
No, I don't think so. I think
Great.
the throat's wide enough and there's kind of a natural, division right there.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Questions, right? Commissioner Sanctus?
And perhaps this is directed at Mr. Rue regarding traffic flow. When I envision peak times for meals, coffee, ice cream, and it converges in the summer, and what I've seen over on State Highway 5 over in Chanhassen where there's a Starbucks and there's a McDonald's across the street. I have seen cars lined up on Highway 5, egressing from 5 to get to Starbucks and then forming a queue. So what kind of traffic analysis has been done for peak utilization of essentially three service retail outlets, food outlets?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, there hasn't been a comprehensive study looking at the combined businesses. In fact, for this proposal, there was not a traffic analysis done because it's repurposing an existing use. Now, you bring up a good point about the combined uses of the coffee and the Burger King, but there's not been an analysis to determine if that's a problem or not. They both, when we went through, as you recall, when we went through the Terry Pine Coffee site work, they did an analysis on the queuing length, and the queuing length did not get into the drive aisle of the Burger King. So with that, I guess, and the fact that the queuing length and the double lanes of drive-through on the Burger King should help relieve a lot of that. So there should be plenty of stacking between the two businesses. And I know Burger King probably does breakfast as well, so there's probably the AM peak is probably your primary problem time. I guess we'll just have to see how it works. So.
I would just like to add to that. Our breakfast day part is our slowest day part. It historically always has been. I don't see that really changing in the future. I mean, McDonald's breakfast is it's a very strong part of their business. I don't have statistics around their percentages per se, but they've always been much stronger in terms of breakfast. It's not something that we chase like they do. So Starbucks in the morning, we're expecting some volume coming through the Starbucks when we're not at our peak. We're more of a lunch, it's definitely more of a lunch dinner destination.
So essentially your menu will not expand into the breakfast hour. It'll be primarily lunch and dinner.
Yeah, I mean, our traffic really starts to pick up, after 11.
Other questions before we go to the city's report? Thank you. You can sit down.
Thank you.
I just have one
more question.
not a question per se as much as an observation. We put in some new housing just further down Eden Prairie Road, a lot of apartments, a lot of families. So I think this is going to be a new resource, and not having to depend on Dairy Queen so much with just the very narrow approach to what they can do with traffic now. I mean, they've been there a long time, and it's gotten a lot more popular because Burger King's been gone.
Right.
So I think this is an opportunity to kind of maybe shift some of that around a little bit and get some time on your side of the property.
Yep, good point.
Thank you. Julie, would you take us through the planner's report?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant is requesting approval of a PUD with waivers as well as a site plan review. As the applicant stated, they are looking at raising the site and reconstructing a new building and a new parking lot. The existing condition out on that site is currently at about 70% impervious. This property is within the shoreline district, which does have a limitation of 30% unless a waiver is approved. So with the new proposal, they're looking to reduce that impervious surface from roughly 70% down to 48%. So roughly a decrease of 22% or so to come closer to that 30% requirement. The site plan does provide parking to meet city code requirements, and as the applicant stated, they are proposing the construction of an outdoor play area on the north side of the building, and as a part of that construction and reduction of parking, there will be a sizable stormwater management facility on the east boundary of the property. The building materials that are proposed are consistent with city code requirements. As Mr. Kaiser stated, it is not necessarily their prototype, but they certainly worked with staff as we talked about what City of Eden Prairie expectations were with regard to building materials and architecture, and arrived at the proposal that you have before you this evening. There are 3 waivers that were requested with the development proposal. The first one is that impervious surface area that I mentioned earlier. So they are requesting an increase to allow the impervious surface to increase over that 30% required by code, but still greatly reducing what is on site. They were also asking for a waiver with regard to the existing ground sign. The existing sign that's out there today, when it was installed, met the 20-foot setback requirement. With roadway improvements and additional right-of-way acquisitions, that setback has shrunk from 20 feet down to 16 feet. So they were asking for that waiver to be approved to allow that setback at the 16-foot mark. The staff is not recommending approval of that waiver simply because it's not needed. As a non-conforming structure, they can utilize that sign as it currently is today. They can replace it. They just can't increase the size. And the signage that they are proposing is consistent with what is out there today. So staff is recommending that that waiver not be approved because the sign can operate in that location without the waiver. The third waiver that they're asking is with regard to menu board sign. You may have noticed on the site plan that there are 2 drive aisles that will extend into the drive-through, and city code allows 32 square feet for menu board signs. It doesn't talk about the number of menu boards that you can have. So it certainly is reasonable to expect that each drive aisle would have its own menu board sign, and staff is recommending approval of that waiver as well. The landscaping plan does meet the city code requirements with regard to the amount of landscaping that is proposed. There are a few minor tweaks that staff is recommending prior to city council review of the project because there's a few landscaping species that need to be increased in size in order to meet the size requirements outlined by code. But otherwise, the overall number meets that requirement. And staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions outlined in your staff report, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thank you, Julie. Questions for the city? Commissioner Park? Mr. Chair? Yep, sorry. Couple questions. Does a playground function extend customer stay time to the point of being concerned about the number of stalls?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, from a parking code standpoint, staff does not have any concerns with the number of parking stalls that are proposed based on the use that is proposed, both internal and the external playground.
Okay. Maybe my question was more theoretical. Would it, in another project analysis, does that come into play? No pun intended, about when trying to figure out, like fast food as an example. You know, you expect a certain turnover. So I'm just curious if, I haven't seen that myself in the ITE manual or anywhere. So that's why it struck me when they were talking about the playground. Kids will stay after they eat and play for another 20 minutes or so, and I don't know if that clogs up a parking lot or not. I just didn't know if there was any study on that or just information.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, certainly play lands, if you will, have been included in multiple fast food chains over the course of recent years. I'm not familiar with any parking requirements that separate out the fast food use and then tack on additional parking requirements based on the square footage of the play structure. So from that perspective, staff would not find this to be anything but compliant with city code, and at this point juncture we have no concern.
Okay, all right. Second question, I get a little bit of a heartache when I see a dead-end parking lot on a drive-through without the ability to have a bypass lane. So they're taking rid of the bypass lane and putting that second menu board on there instead. Sometimes somebody can lay out the site so that the accessible parking stalls are further down towards that dead end, so that people who don't find a parking stall can do a three-point turning maneuver in the access aisle of the the accessible stall. That's not the case here. And I didn't know, does the city have a policy on looking at that? I'm thinking at the lunch hour time period where stalls might be at a premium. People simply can't turn around and make a three-point turn and go backwards, and they can't go forward because of that double drive-through without the bypass. Is there something we can say, should say about that would cause them to have some kind of a striped-off stall near the end of that dead end to ease that problem? The Dairy Queen has the exact same problem across the street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Most of them do have bypass lanes. In this case, there isn't one. I know Dairy Queen, you mentioned Dairy Queen, they do have, you can get by, because I have actually done it, where the line was too long and I went around, so.
Motorcycles? You're good.
It's small, but you can get past it. But so I don't know the exact dimensions of the outside drive aisle. I know once you get past the menu board, there is a bypass lane. So it might just be if there's room to widen the outer stall. I don't know if the architect or the applicant has that dimension handy, but. That would be the only thing I'd suggest is if there's a way to widen that outside lane such that there could be the ability for somebody to get through there.
Right. That or some striped off area so that would give the car the maneuverability option to back into some stall that's always left open to make a three-point turn or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. My third and last question is, because a lot of these menu boards now are these large LED screens, in our signage code, do we have some protection against those menu boards turning into advertising messaging after hours or when there's nobody in the line? This is a very visible Highway 5 busyness, and if there's no cars for 5 minutes, is there something prohibiting them from taking all three screens together and having a large LED billboard announcing the sale of the day or something like that, special on French fries, or after hours or something like that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the city is unable to regulate content. That is a Supreme Court ruling that came down a couple of years ago, and staff's in the process of updating our own code in order to eliminate any references to content. So to answer Commissioner Farr's question, could they advertise the special of the day or French fries are free or something like that? They could certainly change that message consistent with our dynamic display regulations. We do, as a city, have regulations that talk about how often your message can change. I believe it is every 20 minutes. So we're not anticipating something that's going to be really flashy and attention-getting. But from a content-based standpoint, the city is unable to regulate that information.
Okay, that's too bad. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please do so now. Not seeing anyone. Would anyone like to make a motion to close the public hearing? Further discussed.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Motion from Commissioner Higgins. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second for Commissioner Marcos. All those in favor of closing public hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Any more thoughts or questions?
I have a couple thoughts.
Commissioner Marcos.
So part of my thought on that too with the billboard idea and also something we talked about with the Starbucks development was more vegetation, more blocking, natural blocking from 5. I think it would be nice to have more plantings that are year-round that not only block maybe this visual from 5 would be nice for be on the playground and not seeing cars constantly going by, and also the lights from people sitting in the drive-thru. I think that's the exact same thing we talked about for Starbucks. So that was one thing I noted that I think could be improved, is better landscaping along 5. And I'm not sure what the elevation change is there, but some nice big trees, evergreens would be good. I do like that we're reducing the amount of impervious topping there. I think that's an improvement. I mean, the building itself is a huge improvement to what's there, so I think that's great. Really appreciate that this is going to get developed and turned back into something, and I think it will get used. I like that comment. I think it's nice. It'll disperse maybe some of the business, and I think that hopefully will help some of that. I think that was a great idea. So I think even if we're allowing more than what's allowed for the 30%, I think it's a great improvement from what's there. They've obviously made good effort to make it a nice site, and I do have some concerns maybe about parking, thinking about the drive-through gets backed up and how do you even get to the parking, but maybe that's somewhat on the business side too. So back to that previous conversation. So I think in all, it's a great improvement to what's there, and hopefully you guys just consider some additional plantings to help with that site. So that's it.
Comments?
I agree completely with Commissioner Marcos's comments. The decreasing the impervious surface and increasing the groundwater, dealing with groundwater is a great thing. And the old Burger King was old. It was dated. You made a good decision to update it. And I do like the new design and a little less imposing. So I think it's a good project.
Any other comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman. Move to recommend approval for the planned unit development concept review on 1.34 acres, planned unit development district review with waivers on 1.34 acres, site plan review on 1.34 acres based on plan stamp dated June 21st, 2021, and the staff report dated June 21st, 2021.
A motion for approval from Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Second from Commissioner Sanctus. All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? Good luck with your project. It's great to see that being developed. I'm not sure what people are going to ask me about anymore, though, so. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. All right. Julie, any planners reports this evening?
No, sir.
All right. Do we have any members' reports? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.